Stop crying now, Jimin. This happened because of you. Namjoon's voice was cold. You always make everything about yourself, Jin added, shaking his head. Jungkook collapsed after arguing with you, and now you're standing here pretending to be worried? Yoongi said sharply. Jimin looked at Jungkook's pale face on the hospital bed and whispered, I never wanted this. Then don't touch him, Taehyung suddenly shouted as he stepped between Jimin and the bed. You've already hurt him enough. Stay away from him. Jimin froze. His hands trembled. Then Jungkook slowly opened his eyes. Jimin could not breathe. He stared at Jungkook, waiting for him to say something. Anything. The room became completely silent. Even Taehyung stopped moving. Jungkook looked directly at Jimin with tired eyes and quietly said, Why are you crying now, when you were the one who told me to let you go? The words hit Jimin like a knife. Tears immediately fell down his face, but what nobody inside that hospital room knew was that Jimin had been hiding a secret for months, and that secret was the real reason he had pushed Jungkook away. Jimin stood frozen beside the hospital bed, unable to wipe the tears running down his face. Jungkook's weak voice kept repeating inside his mind. Why are you crying now, when you were the one who told me to let you go? The question sounded simple, but for Jimin, it felt unbearable, because he knew Jungkook had every right to hate him. Taehyung remained standing between them like a wall. His expression was colder than Jimin had ever seen before. You heard him, Taehyung said quietly. Stop making him suffer. Jimin slowly looked up. I didn't come here to hurt him. Then why did you come? Taehyung asked immediately. To make yourself feel better? To cry in front of him? To pretend you care? Jimin's lips parted, but no words came out. Namjoon sighed heavily and looked away. Jin crossed his arms while Yoongi rubbed his forehead. Nobody defended Jimin. Nobody. At that moment, he felt completely alone. Dear viewers, what would you do if everyone suddenly blamed you for something you never wanted to happen? And before we continue, tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. Inside the hospital room, the silence became painful. Then Jungkook slowly moved his hand. His fingers were trembling because of weakness. Jimin instinctively took one step forward. Jungkook. Don't, Taehyung warned. I said, don't touch him. Jimin stopped again. Jungkook looked at him quietly. There was no anger in his eyes. Somehow that hurt even more. Because if Jungkook had shouted at him, maybe Jimin could have endured it. But this calm expression felt like distance, like resignation. You should go home, Jungkook finally said. Jimin stared at him in disbelief. You want me to leave? Jungkook closed his eyes for a second. I'm tired. Those 3 words shattered something inside Jimin, because he knew Jungkook was not talking only about today. He was talking about everything, their arguments, their misunderstandings, their endless emotional exhaustion. Jimin lowered his head. His hands shook harder than before. I'm sorry, he whispered. Nobody answered him. Then the sound of the heart monitor filled the room again. And for the first time in years, Jimin felt like a stranger standing beside the person he cared about most. Jimin slowly stepped backward. He wanted to say something else, but every word seemed trapped inside his throat. He looked at Jungkook one more time, hoping to see some sign that he should stay. Instead, Jungkook kept staring at the ceiling, looking completely exhausted. Fine, Jimin said quietly. I'll leave. He turned toward the door, but before he could take another step, Taehyung spoke again. You should have done that months ago. The words made Jimin stop. The room became tense once more. Jimin did not turn around. What do you mean? He asked. Taehyung's jaw tightened. You keep coming close to him and then pushing him away. You keep acting like he matters to you and then disappearing. Do you know what kind of mess that creates? Jimin slowly faced him again. You don't understand anything. Then explain it, Taehyung said immediately. Explain why Jungkook couldn't sleep for weeks. Explain why he stopped eating properly. Explain why he looked at his phone every night waiting for a message from you. Jimin's eyes widened. He looked at Jungkook. Jungkook still said nothing. Dear viewers, have you ever discovered someone's pain long after it was already too late? Tell us honestly in the comments. Jimin felt his chest become tight. He did all that? He whispered. Jin finally looked at him. You really didn't know? Jimin slowly shook his head. Namjoon let out a long breath. Then maybe none of us understood everything. But Taehyung refused to calm down. No, he knew exactly what he was doing. Stop it, Jungkook suddenly said. Everyone looked at him. His voice was weak, but his eyes had opened again. Don't fight because of me. Taehyung immediately softened. I'm just trying to protect you. Jungkook looked at him quietly. I know. Then his eyes moved toward Jimin. And he doesn't need to be attacked right now. Jimin looked completely shocked. After everything that had happened, Jungkook was still defending him. The realization hurt more than every accusation in that room. Tears gathered in his eyes again. Why? He whispered. Jungkook frowned slightly. Why what? Why are you still protecting me? Jungkook stared at him for several seconds. Then he looked away first. Because no matter how much this hurts, he paused. I still can't hate you. The entire room became silent. Even Taehyung looked surprised. Jimin's breathing became uneven. He wanted to answer, but at that exact moment, his phone suddenly vibrated inside his pocket. He looked at the screen and immediately went pale. The color immediately disappeared from Jimin's face. He stared at the phone screen as if he had just seen something terrifying. His fingers froze around the device. Namjoon noticed first. Jimin? He asked carefully. What's wrong? Jimin did not answer. He simply kept staring at the message. Taehyung narrowed his eyes. Who is it? Still no answer. Jungkook slowly turned his head toward him. Even in his weakened condition, he could tell something was different. Jimin looked frightened. Truly frightened. Then another message appeared. The phone vibrated again. Jimin quickly turned off the screen and slipped the phone back into his pocket. I need to go, he said suddenly. Right now. Taehyung frowned. What? I said I need to leave. Jimin's voice sounded shaky. He was already moving toward the door. Wait. Jungkook's voice stopped him again. Jimin froze with his hand on the doorknob. You're crying, Jungkook said quietly. And now you're running away. What's happening? Jimin closed his eyes. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. The room felt smaller and smaller. Dear viewers, if someone you cared about suddenly looked terrified and refused to explain anything, would you stop them or let them go? And don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Jimin slowly turned around again. He looked at Jungkook's pale face. Then he looked at the others. They were all staring at him, waiting for an answer. But how could he explain? How could he tell them the truth? His phone vibrated for a third time. This time, even Yoongi heard it. That's the third message, he said quietly. Who keeps calling you? Jimin swallowed hard. It's nothing. Don't lie, Taehyung said immediately. You look like you've seen a ghost. Jimin looked down. His hands were shaking again. Jungkook noticed it immediately. Jimin, he said softly, look at me. Slowly, Jimin raised his head. Their eyes met. Jungkook frowned. You're scared. It was not a question, it was a fact. Jimin could not answer, because yes, he was scared. More scared than he had been in months. Then Jungkook said something that made everyone in the room look at him. "Stay." Jimin blinked. "What?" "Don't leave yet." Jungkook's voice remained quiet. "Tell me what's wrong first." Jimin's eyes widened. Even after everything, Jungkook was asking him to stay. Taehyung looked completely confused. "Jungkook, are you serious right now?" Jungkook did not take his eyes off Jimin. "Yes." Taehyung looked frustrated. "He already hurt you enough." Jungkook slowly inhaled. "Then let me decide if I still want him here." The room became silent once again. Jimin felt his chest tighten. Why was Jungkook always like this? Why did he keep reaching out when everyone else had already stepped away? The phone vibrated again. This time, Jimin could not ignore it. He slowly pulled it out. His hands trembled as he read the newest message. Then, his breathing suddenly stopped. The message contained only one sentence. "We know you're at the hospital, and if you tell Jungkook the truth tonight, everything will be ruined." Jimin felt all the warmth leave his body. His fingers tightened around the phone so hard that his knuckles turned white. He read the message again and again, hoping the words would somehow change. They did not. "We know you're at the hospital, and if you tell Jungkook the truth tonight, everything will be ruined." His breathing became uneven. Jungkook immediately noticed. "Jimin?" he called softly. No response. "Jimin." This time his voice was firmer. Slowly, Jimin lifted his head. His eyes looked completely different. There was fear in them, but there was something else too. Guilt. Deep guilt. Namjoon took one step closer. "You're scaring us," he said carefully. "Tell us what's happening." Jimin quickly locked his phone and placed it back into his pocket. "Nothing," he answered. "It's really nothing." Taehyung immediately shook his head. "No, don't do that again." Jimin looked at him. "Do what?" "Lie." The answer came instantly. "Every time something happens, you say it's nothing. Then everything becomes worse." Jimin opened his mouth but closed it again. Because Taehyung was right. He had been saying those same words for months. "It's nothing. Don't worry about me. Everything is fine." And every single time, he had been lying. Dear viewers, have you ever hidden something so important that eventually the lie became heavier than the truth itself? Tell us honestly in the comments. The hospital room suddenly felt suffocating. Jungkook's eyes remained fixed on Jimin. "Did something happen?" he asked quietly. Jimin forced himself to answer calmly. "No." "Are you in trouble?" "No." "Are you afraid?" Jimin did not answer this time. Jungkook immediately noticed, so did everyone else. Yoongi slowly lowered his hand from his forehead and looked directly at Jimin. "You're afraid," he said. It was not a question. Jimin looked away. Taehyung frowned again. "Who sent those messages?" Silence. "Jimin." Silence again. Then Jungkook did something unexpected. Despite his condition, he slowly sat up on the hospital bed. Everyone reacted immediately. "Hey, don't move," Jin said, stepping forward. But Jungkook ignored him. He kept looking only at Jimin. "Come here," he said softly. Jimin looked stunned. "What?" "Come here." For a second, nobody moved. Even Taehyung seemed surprised. "Jungkook." "Please," Jungkook said, his voice becoming weaker. Jimin's heart tightened. Without thinking, he took one step closer, then another. Taehyung watched him carefully but said nothing this time. Finally, Jimin stood beside the hospital bed once again, the same place where everything had started only minutes ago. Jungkook looked up at him. He seemed exhausted, pale, and emotionally drained, but his eyes remained calm. "Look at me," he said. Jimin did. "Whatever happened?" Jungkook paused to catch his breath. "You don't have to carry it alone." The words nearly broke him, Because Jungkook had no idea. He had absolutely no idea why Jimin had been pushing him away for months. He did not know about the late-night phone calls. He did not know about the threats. He did not know why Jimin suddenly changed and became distant. Most importantly, he did not know that the secret Jimin had been protecting this entire time was directly connected to him. Tears suddenly filled Jimin's eyes again. He quickly looked down. "Why are you doing this?" he whispered. "Doing what?" "Being kind to me." The room became quiet. Jungkook stared at him for several long seconds. Then he gave a tired smile that somehow looked even sadder than crying. "Because even after everything," he said softly, "you're still the first person I looked for when I woke up." The words completely destroyed Jimin's remaining strength. A tear rolled down his face, then another. He covered his mouth with one hand, trying desperately not to cry in front of everyone. But it was impossible, because at that exact moment, he realized something terrifying. If he continued hiding the truth, he would lose Jungkook forever. But if he finally told him everything, the dangerous people behind those messages might destroy all of their lives. Jimin lowered his head, trying to control his breathing, but the tears kept falling. Nobody in the room spoke. They had never seen him like this before. Jimin was usually the one who smiled first, the one who acted strong even when things were difficult. Seeing him break down in complete silence felt wrong. Jungkook slowly reached out his hand from the hospital bed. He looked weak, but his eyes remained fixed on Jimin. "Hey," he said softly. Jimin looked up. "Don't cry like that." Those simple words only made him cry harder. Taehyung stared at the scene with a complicated expression. He was angry at Jimin. He wanted to protect Jungkook. But right now, the person standing beside the bed did not look dangerous. He looked terrified. Namjoon finally spoke. "Jimin, whatever is happening, we can deal with it together." Jimin immediately shook his head. "No." "Why not?" Jin asked carefully. "Because you don't understand." "Then help us understand," Yoongi said quietly. "You don't have to explain everything. Just tell us why you're so scared." Jimin closed his eyes. His phone suddenly vibrated again. The sound echoed inside the silent room. Everyone heard it. This time, nobody looked away. Jungkook frowned. "That's the person making you cry, isn't it?" Silence. "Jimin." Silence again. Then, slowly, Jimin nodded. The room became tense. Taehyung immediately stepped forward. "Who is it?" Jimin's voice came out almost as a whisper. "I can't tell you." "Why?" Taehyung demanded. "Because I can't." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I have." Dear viewers, what would you do if someone threatened you, and the only way to protect the people you loved was to keep lying to them? Tell us honestly in the comments, and let us know where you're watching from today. Inside the hospital room, Jungkook kept staring at Jimin. He suddenly remembered something. Months ago, Jimin had started changing. He canceled plans without explanation. He stopped answering messages. Sometimes he would disappear for days and return acting like everything was normal. Jungkook had thought Jimin simply did not care anymore, but now he was not sure. "When did this start?" Jungkook suddenly asked. Jimin looked at him in confusion. "What?" "Whatever this is, when did it start?" Jimin froze. "Jungkook! Answer me!" The room remained silent. Jimin swallowed hard. "A few months ago." Jungkook's expression slowly changed. "A few months?" Jimin nodded once. Suddenly, several memories returned to him. The cancelled dinner, the missed calls, the arguments, the day Jimin looked at him and said, maybe they needed distance. All of it happened a few months ago. Jungkook's eyes widened slightly. "You started pushing me away because of this?" Jimin immediately looked down. He could not answer. He did not need to. The silence itself was enough. Namjoon looked shocked. Jin looked confused. Even Taehyung seemed caught off guard. Then Jungkook quietly asked the question nobody expected. "Were you protecting me?" Jimin's head lifted immediately. Their eyes met. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed properly. Because for the first time tonight, someone had finally asked the question Jimin feared the most. And after several long seconds, tears gathered in his eyes once again. He looked at Jungkook and whispered only one word. "Yes." The room fell completely silent. Nobody expected that answer. Not Namjoon, not Jin, not Yoongi, not even Taehyung, and certainly not Jungkook. He stared at Jimin as if he had forgotten how to breathe. "Protecting me?" he repeated quietly. Jimin's eyes filled with tears again. He slowly nodded. "Yes." Jungkook frowned in confusion. "From what?" Jimin looked away immediately. The question came too quickly, too directly. "I can't tell you." Taehyung let out a frustrated laugh. "Again, you can't tell us anything." Jimin closed his eyes. "I know how this looks." "No," Taehyung said sharply. "You don't. Because for months, Jungkook thought you didn't care about him anymore. He blamed himself every day. He kept asking what he did wrong. Every word felt like another knife in Jimin's chest. "Stop," he whispered. But Taehyung continued. "He stayed awake waiting for your messages. He defended you when everyone told him to move on. He kept making excuses for you." "Please stop. And now you suddenly tell us you were protecting him?" Jimin's breathing became uneven. "I said stop." "Then explain," Taehyung shouted. "Explain why he had to suffer like this." Suddenly, Jungkook spoke. "Taehyung!" The room froze. Taehyung looked at him immediately. Jungkook's voice remained weak, but his eyes were serious. "Enough!" "But I said enough!" Taehyung slowly became quiet. Jungkook looked back at Jimin. There were still tears on his face. He looked exhausted, frightened, completely overwhelmed. Yet one thing seemed clear. He was not lying. Jungkook could see it. "You really thought pushing me away would protect me?" he asked softly. Jimin nodded once. "Yes." "Even if it made me hate you?" Jimin swallowed hard. "Yes." "Even if it made you cry like this?" Silence, then another small nod. Jungkook stared at him for several seconds. Nobody interrupted. "Dear viewers, could you push away someone you love if you believed it was the only way to keep them safe? Or would you choose to stay beside them no matter the danger? Tell us honestly in the comments." Jungkook slowly leaned back against the pillow. He looked tired again. He looked like he was putting together pieces of a puzzle that suddenly made no sense. "Then this wasn't because you stopped caring." Jimin immediately shook his head. "No." "You weren't avoiding me because you hated me?" "No." "Then every time you walked away?" Jungkook's voice became quieter. "It hurt you too?" Jimin's eyes closed. A tear escaped. "Every single time!" The answer broke something inside the room. Jin looked away first. Namjoon lowered his head. Yoongi exhaled slowly. Even Taehyung remained silent. Because suddenly the story looked completely different. The person they thought had abandoned Jungkook had actually been suffering alone. But one question still remained. Why? Jungkook looked at him carefully. "Tell me one thing." Jimin slowly looked up again. "Am I the reason you're being threatened?" The question hit him like lightning. His face turned pale. Nobody missed it. Nobody. Taehyung's eyes widened. Namjoon looked alarmed. Yoongi immediately sat up straighter, and Jungkook already knew the answer before Jimin even spoke, because the fear on Jimin's face said everything. Then, very slowly, tears falling once again, Jimin whispered, "Yes, it's because of you." Nobody moved. Nobody even seemed to blink. The words hung heavily in the air. Yes, it's because of you. Jungkook stared at Jimin as though the entire world had suddenly become unfamiliar. Because of me? He repeated quietly. Jimin's lips trembled. He immediately regretted saying it out loud. But it was too late. The truth had finally escaped. Taehyung looked completely stunned. What does that even mean? He demanded. Jimin did not answer. He looked down again. Namjoon slowly stepped closer. Jimin, he said carefully, look at us. Jimin remained still. Nobody here is your enemy? Still nothing. Then Yoongi spoke for the first time in several minutes. Whoever is threatening you wanted you to stay away from Jungkook. Jimin's eyes widened slightly. Yoongi noticed immediately. I guessed right. Silence. Jin frowned. Wait, you're saying someone specifically wanted them separated? Yoongi slowly nodded. That's exactly what I'm saying. The room became tense once more. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Is that true? Jimin's breathing became uneven again. He hated this. He hated every second of it, because every question brought them closer to the truth, and the truth was dangerous. Jimin! Jungkook's voice became softer. Please answer me. Finally, Jimin nodded. The room seemed to freeze again. Taehyung ran a hand through his hair in frustration. This is insane. He looked directly at Jimin. Who would do something like that? No answer. Why would someone care if you stayed close to Jungkook? Still no answer. Who are they? Silence again. Taehyung looked like he wanted to scream. Dear viewers, imagine discovering that someone had secretly manipulated your relationships for months without you knowing. What would you do first? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. Inside the hospital room, Jungkook suddenly remembered something else. The day you asked for distance, he said slowly. Jimin looked up. You cried. The room became quiet again. I remember it now, Jungkook continued. You tried to hide it, but your eyes were red. Jimin's hands tightened into fists. Jungkook. And that day, your phone kept ringing too. Another memory surfaced. Then you looked at the screen and immediately changed. Jimin's breathing stopped. How could Jungkook remember these things? You didn't leave because you wanted to, Jungkook said quietly. You left because someone made you. Jimin closed his eyes. He could not deny it anymore. Too many pieces had connected. Too many memories suddenly made sense. Then Jungkook asked the question that frightened him most. Did they threaten me? Silence. Jimin. Silence again. Did they threaten me? This time Jimin looked directly at him. His eyes were filled with fear. Fear so deep that everyone in the room felt it. Then, very slowly, he shook his head. Jungkook looked confused. No? Jimin swallowed hard. Another tear rolled down his face. No, he whispered. They didn't threaten you. Everyone looked relieved for exactly 1 second. Then Jimin said the words that made the atmosphere even heavier. They threatened all of you. The room became completely silent again. The relief that had appeared on everyone's faces disappeared immediately. They threatened all of you. The sentence felt heavier than anything Jimin had said tonight. Namjoon's expression changed first. Jin's eyes widened. Yoongi stopped moving entirely. Taehyung looked as though he had misheard, and Jungkook simply stared at Jimin in disbelief. All of us? He asked quietly. Jimin nodded. Yes. You mean? Jungkook swallowed hard. Me, the members, everyone? Another slow nod. Nobody knew what to say. For months, while they had been blaming Jimin and questioning his actions, he had apparently been carrying something terrifying alone. Taehyung finally spoke. Who are these people? Jimin looked down again. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Taehyung asked immediately. I mean exactly that. Jimin's voice shook. I never saw their faces. The room remained still. Then how did they contact you? Namjoon asked. Messages, calls, anonymous emails. Since when? Jin asked quietly. Jimin closed his eyes. Almost 6 months. The answer shocked everyone. 6 months? Yoongi repeated. Jimin nodded again. At first, I ignored it. I thought someone was playing a stupid joke. He took a shaky breath. Then they started sending me things. Jungkook frowned. Things? Jimin slowly looked at him. Pictures. Nobody spoke. Pictures of all of you. The atmosphere instantly changed. What kind of pictures? Namjoon asked carefully. Jimin swallowed hard. Pictures of you leaving the company building. Pictures of you going home. Pictures of you eating together. He looked down. Pictures of Jungkook sleeping during a flight. The room suddenly felt colder. Even Taehyung stopped looking angry. This was not a joke anymore. This sounded dangerous. They were watching us? Jin asked quietly. Jimin nodded once. Yes? Nobody knew what to say. Dear viewers, what would you do if someone sent you secret pictures of the people you cared about and warned you to stay silent? Would you tell everyone immediately or keep the secret to protect them? Tell us honestly in the comments. Jungkook looked at Jimin carefully. What did they want? Jimin's eyes slowly filled with tears again. At first, he paused. At first, they wanted information. Everyone frowned. Information? Namjoon asked. About schedules, about where we would be. Jimin quickly shook his head. I never told them anything, never. Nobody accused him. They could already see how much this had affected him. Then what happened? Yoongi asked quietly. Jimin looked down. They became angry. Silence. And then they made rules. The sentence immediately caught everyone's attention. Rules? Jungkook repeated. Jimin nodded. 3 rules. Nobody interrupted him now. The first rule? His voice became weaker. I had to stop spending time with Jungkook. Jungkook's expression slowly changed. The second rule, Jimin continued, I could not tell any of you about them. The room remained silent. Then Jimin took another shaky breath. Tears were already falling again. And the third rule? He stopped speaking. Nobody moved. Jimin, Jungkook said softly. What was the third rule? Jimin looked directly into his eyes. For a long time, he could not answer. Then, with tears running down his face, he whispered, If I broke the first 2 rules, they promised someone in this room would get hurt next.
Nobody spoke. The air inside the hospital room felt heavy and cold. If I broke the first 2 rules, they promised someone in this room would get hurt next. The words echoed inside everyone's minds. Jimin lowered his head because he could no longer bear looking at their faces. For months, he had carried this alone. For months, he had accepted being misunderstood. And now that the truth was finally coming out, he suddenly felt exhausted. Jungkook looked at him without blinking. His expression slowly changed from confusion to disbelief, and then to something else entirely. Guilt. You did all of that because of a threat? Jungkook asked quietly. Jimin's lips trembled. Yes. You let me think you hated me. Yes. You let everyone blame you. Yes. His answers became softer each time. The room remained silent. Taehyung suddenly turned around and walked several steps away from the bed. He put both hands on his head. He looked frustrated and angry, but this time he was not angry at Jimin. This is crazy, he said quietly. This is completely crazy. Namjoon slowly sat down in the chair beside the window. Even he seemed unable to process everything. Jin looked at Jimin with a different expression now. Why didn't you ask for help? He asked. Jimin laughed softly. But it was not a happy laugh. It sounded broken. I wanted to. Everyone looked at him. I wanted to tell all of you every day. His voice was shaking. But every time I tried, he swallowed hard, a new message would come. What kind of message? Yoongi asked. Jimin slowly took his phone out of his pocket. His fingers were trembling. He looked at the screen for several seconds before handing the phone to Namjoon. Nobody had ever seen him this nervous. Namjoon looked at the screen. The color immediately disappeared from his face. Jin stood up. What is it? Namjoon did not answer. He simply handed the phone to him. Jin looked down. Then he froze. What happened? Taehyung asked. Jin slowly lifted his eyes. There are pictures. What pictures? Jin looked disturbed. Pictures of us. The room became quiet again. Taehyung quickly walked over and took the phone. A few seconds later, even his face changed. One picture showed Jungkook entering his apartment. Another showed Namjoon inside a restaurant. Another showed Jin sitting in his car. There were dozens of pictures. Some were taken during daylight. Others were taken at night. The angles were strange. It was obvious. Someone had been watching them. For a long time. Dear viewers, imagine opening someone's phone and discovering that strangers had secretly been following you and your friends for months. What would be your first reaction? Tell us honestly in the comments and let us know where you're watching from today. Inside the room, Jungkook looked at Jimin. You saw all of this alone. Jimin nodded. And you carried it for 6 months. Another nod. Jungkook looked away. His chest suddenly felt tight. Because he remembered every terrible thing he had said to Jimin. He remembered accusing him of not caring. He remembered asking him why he had changed. He remembered telling himself to stop thinking about him. But this entire time, Jimin had been protecting everyone. Completely alone. Suddenly, Jungkook looked back at him. Were you scared? The question surprised everyone. Jimin blinked. What? Were you scared? For a few seconds, Jimin simply stared at him. Then he looked down. And nodded. Every day. The answer broke something inside Jungkook. Because Jimin had always hated being alone. Everyone knew that. He smiled often. He talked often. He stayed close to people because silence made him uncomfortable. And somehow, this person had spent 6 months carrying fear by himself. Jungkook slowly lowered his eyes. He suddenly felt terrible. Because while Jimin had been protecting him, he had only been thinking about his own pain. I should have noticed, he whispered. Everyone looked at him. Jimin frowned. What? Jungkook slowly looked up again. I should have noticed something was wrong. No. Yes. No, Jungkook. I know you. His voice remained quiet. I know your expressions. I know your habits. I know when you're lying. Jimin's eyes slowly widened. But I was too hurt to pay attention. Silence. I kept thinking about myself. No, Jimin whispered. And because of that, Jungkook looked directly into his eyes. You had to suffer alone. Jimin's breathing became uneven. No. You did. No. You did. Suddenly, Jimin shook his head. No. Everyone looked at him. His tears were falling again. No, don't do that. Do what? Don't blame yourself. The room became quiet. Jimin looked at him desperately. This isn't your fault. Then whose fault is it? The people who did this. But I chose this. Everyone looked at him. I chose to stay quiet. His voice broke. I chose to walk away. Another tear rolled down his face. I chose to let everyone hate me. The room felt heavier. Because nobody could deny it. He really had chosen all of that. And he had done it because he was afraid someone he loved would get hurt. Then something unexpected happened. Jungkook slowly reached out his hand again. This time, he did not hesitate. He simply held out his hand toward Jimin. Everyone looked at him. Even Jimin looked confused. Jungkook, come here. Jimin did not move. Jungkook kept his hand raised. Come here. Slowly. Very slowly. Jimin took one step closer to the bed. Jimin stood beside the hospital bed again, but this time he did not know what to do. Jungkook's hand was still extended toward him. The room had become completely silent. Nobody interrupted. Nobody even seemed willing to breathe too loudly. Jimin simply stared at that hand. For months, he had forced himself to stay away from it. For months, he had convinced himself that distance was necessary. And now, after all the lies and misunderstandings, Jungkook was reaching for him first. Jungkook, Jimin whispered. Take my hand. His voice was weak, but there was no hesitation in it. Jimin looked terrified. No. Jungkook frowned. No. You shouldn't. Why? Jimin's eyes became red again. Because I already caused enough problems. Jungkook looked at him for several seconds. Then he said quietly, You still don't understand. Everyone looked at him. Jimin blinked. What? You think you're the problem. Silence. But you're not. Jimin immediately shook his head. No, I am. No. I lied. Because you were scared. I hurt you. Because you wanted to protect me. I pushed everyone away. Because you thought it was the only option. Every answer came immediately. Jimin looked completely overwhelmed. No, he whispered. Yes. The room remained quiet. Taehyung slowly lowered his eyes. He still looked troubled. Because every sentence from Jungkook made sense. Everything suddenly made sense. The cancelled plans. The sudden distance. The tears. The cold behavior. The late-night disappearances. All of it. It had never been hatred. It had been fear. A terrible, lonely fear. Dear viewers, what would you do if you discovered that someone who hurt you was actually trying to protect you all along? Could you forgive them immediately? Or would the pain still remain? Tell us honestly in the comments and let us know where you're watching from today. Inside the room, Jungkook's hand remained in the air. Jimin. Jimin slowly looked at him again. I'm asking you one more time. His voice became softer. Take my hand. Jimin's breathing became uneven. Then something unexpected happened. He took another step closer. Then another. Finally, his trembling hand slowly reached forward. Their fingers touched. And the moment they did, Jimin completely broke. His shoulders shook. He covered his face with one hand and started crying again. Not quietly. Not carefully. He cried as though all 6 months of fear had suddenly become too heavy to carry anymore. Everyone looked stunned. Namjoon had seen Jimin cry before. Jin had seen it. Yoongi had seen it. Taehyung too. But never like this. Never this completely. Never this helplessly. Jungkook looked at him with wide eyes. Then he slowly tightened his grip. It's okay, he said softly. That only made Jimin cry harder. It's okay. No, Jimin whispered between tears. Yes. No. You don't have to do this alone anymore. The sentence made the entire room go silent. Because it sounded like a promise. Jimin slowly looked at him. His eyes were completely red. What if they hurt you? They won't. You don't know that. No. What if they hurt Taehyung? What if they hurt Namjoon? What if they hurt everyone? Jungkook remained quiet. What if something terrible happens because of me? Silence. Then Jungkook asked something unexpected. Do you trust me? The question surprised him. What? Do you trust me? Jimin blinked. Of course I do. Then trust me now. The answer left him speechless. Jungkook looked directly into his eyes. I don't know who these people are. Silence. I don't know what they want. Silence. But I know one thing. He slowly tightened his hand around Jimin's. You don't have to be afraid by yourself anymore. Jimin could not answer. Because hearing those words, after months of loneliness, felt overwhelming. Then his phone vibrated again. Everyone froze. The sound suddenly felt terrifying. Jimin's face immediately turned pale. He instinctively pulled his hand away from Jungkook. No. The phone vibrated again. No. Again. No. His breathing became uneven. Taehyung quickly stepped forward. What is it? Jimin backed away. What happened? Another vibration. This time, Jimin looked genuinely terrified. Don't. Jimin. Don't come closer. Everyone stopped moving. Jimin quickly took out his phone. There was another message. And another. And another. 5 messages had arrived at once. His fingers trembled so badly that he almost dropped the device. Jungkook's expression changed. Jimin. No response. Look at me. No response. Then Jimin finally opened the messages. His eyes moved across the screen. 1 second passed. Then another. Suddenly, all the color disappeared from his face. The phone slipped from his hand and fell onto the floor. Everyone immediately looked at him. Jimin looked as if he could no longer breathe. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Namjoon quickly picked up the phone. The moment he read the messages, he froze. What is it? Jin asked. No answer. Namjoon. Still no answer. Slowly, very slowly, Namjoon lifted his eyes. And for the first time that night, he looked frightened. They know, he whispered. The room became silent. Taehyung frowned. They know what? Namjoon swallowed hard. Then he looked directly at Jimin. They know he told us everything. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the final message on the screen peered before everyone's eyes. Look outside the hospital window. We are closer than you think. Nobody spoke for several long seconds. The words on the phone seemed unreal. Look outside the hospital window. We are closer than you think. The atmosphere inside the room changed instantly. Until now, the threat had felt distant. Frightening, yes, but distant. Suddenly, it no longer felt that way. Suddenly, it felt like someone might actually be nearby. Taehyung turned toward the window first. Wait. His voice sounded different. Nobody moved. Slowly, he walked toward the large glass window beside the hospital bed. The city lights outside looked normal. Cars were moving. Streetlights glowed. People walked on the sidewalks below. Everything looked ordinary. And somehow, that made it even more frightening. Because anyone could be watching. Anyone. Namjoon immediately stood up. Move away from the window. Taehyung looked at him. What? I said move away. But. Now. Something in Namjoon's voice made everyone pay attention. Taehyung slowly stepped away. Jin looked confused. Do you think they're really here? Namjoon looked at the phone again. I don't know. Maybe they're bluffing. Maybe. But maybe not. The room became quiet again. Jimin looked completely pale. His breathing was still uneven. They know. Nobody answered. They know I told you. Still nobody answered. I shouldn't have said anything. Stop. Everyone looked at Jungkook. His voice remained weak, but his expression was serious. Jimin looked at him. This isn't your fault. It is. No. It is. No. The answer came immediately. Jimin looked close to breaking down again. You don't understand. Then help me understand. They're watching us. I know. They know where we are. I know. They could be outside right now. I know. Then why aren't you scared? For the first time, Jungkook became quiet. The room waited. Then he finally answered. I am. Everyone looked at him. Jimin blinked. What? I am scared. The answer surprised him. Because Jungkook rarely admitted fear. Almost never. Jungkook slowly looked down at his hand. I'm scared. Silence. I'm scared because you carried this alone. Silence. I'm scared because someone has been watching us. Silence. And I'm scared because you look like you're about to collapse. Jimin stared at him. But I'm not scared of you telling us. The room remained completely quiet. I'm glad you told us. Those words seemed to hit Jimin harder than anything else. Because for 6 months, he had been terrified of this exact moment. Terrified of speaking. Terrified of involving them. Terrified that everything would become worse. Yet nobody was angry. Nobody was blaming him. Instead, they looked worried. Worried about him. Dear viewers, what would you feel if you spent months protecting people from a secret, only to discover they wished you had trusted them from the beginning? Tell us honestly in the comments and let us know where you're watching from today. Inside the room, Yoongi suddenly stood up. Everyone looked at him. He had been unusually quiet. Too quiet. Now his expression looked serious. Something doesn't make sense. Nobody interrupted. Yoongi looked at the phone. They've been threatening you for 6 months. Jimin nodded. They know your number. Another nod. They know our schedules. Yes. They know where we are tonight. Yes. Yoongi slowly crossed his arms. That means one thing. The room became still. What? Jin asked. Yoongi looked around. They have information they shouldn't have. Silence. Taehyung frowned. So this isn't random. Nobody moved. This person knows too much. Namjoon slowly looked at him. You think someone has access to private information? Yoongi nodded. Exactly. The room suddenly felt colder. Jimin slowly looked up. No. Yoongi looked at him. Have you considered it? No. Why not? Because. Jimin stopped speaking. Because he had considered it. Many times. And every time he did, he immediately pushed the thought away. Because it frightened him. Because it meant the danger might be closer than he wanted to believe. Yoongi watched his expression carefully. You did think about it. Silence. You just didn't want to accept it. Silence again. Taehyung looked confused. What are you both talking about? Nobody answered immediately. Then Namjoon slowly said it. You think this person knows us? The sentence seemed to stop the entire room. Jin looked shocked. What? Yoongi nodded once. I think that's possible. No way. Why not? Because, Jin looked around, because that's insane. Yoongi remained calm. They know our schedules. Silence. They know where we live. Silence. They know where Jungkook is hospitalized. Silence. And they knew the exact moment Jimin finally told us the truth. Nobody said anything. Because nobody could argue with those facts. Suddenly, a terrible possibility appeared in everyone's minds. What if the person watching them was not a stranger? Jimin felt cold. Very cold. No, he whispered. Jungkook looked at him. What? Jimin slowly shook his head. No. What is it? No. Jimin. He looked directly at Jungkook. His eyes looked terrified again. Because suddenly, he remembered something. A memory. Small. Strain. Something he had ignored. The first anonymous message. The first threat. The first picture. At the time, he had thought nothing about it. But now it seemed different. Very different. His breathing suddenly stopped. Jimin. No response. Jimin. He slowly lifted his head. His face had turned completely white. Namjoon immediately noticed. What happened? Jimin looked at everyone. Then he whispered something that made the room go silent once again. I think. He swallowed hard. I think I've seen one of them before. The room became completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody even seemed to breathe. Jimin's last sentence hung heavily in the air. I think I've seen one of them before. Taehyung was the first to react. What? Jimin looked shaken. I'm not sure. Namjoon stepped closer. No, tell us exactly what you remember. Jimin swallowed hard. His mind was racing. For months, he had tried not to think about it. Every time the memory appeared, he pushed it away. Because it scared him. Because it made no sense. But now it refused to disappear. Jungkook looked at him carefully. Jimin. Slowly, Jimin lifted his eyes. Take your time. The gentleness in Jungkook's voice somehow made this even harder. Jimin closed his eyes. Then he spoke. The first message came after one of our company events. Everyone listened carefully. I remember leaving the building late that night. Silence. I thought everyone had already gone home. He took a slow breath. But when I reached the parking area, his voice weakened. I saw someone. Taehyung frowned. Who? I don't know. What did they look like? Jimin pressed one hand against his forehead. I couldn't see clearly. Silence. It was dark. Silence. They were wearing a cap. Silence. And they were standing beside a black car. Nobody interrupted. Then Jimin slowly opened his eyes again. I remember something else. Everyone looked at him. They were staring at me. The room felt colder. Namjoon frowned. You're sure? Jimin nodded slowly. Yes. Then what happened? They smiled. Nobody moved. Jimin's breathing became uneven again. I thought it was strange. Silence. Then my phone received its first message. What did it say? Jin asked quietly. Jimin looked down. I still remember every word. Nobody spoke. Then he whispered. Take care of Jungkook. He means everything to you. The room became silent. Even Taehyung looked confused. That doesn't sound threatening. I know. Jimin nodded. At first it didn't. Silence. I thought someone was being weird. What happened next? Yoongi asked. Jimin looked at him. The next message arrived 1 minute later. Everyone waited. This time, his voice trembled. It said, if you want him to stay safe, listen carefully. Nobody moved. Jungkook stared at him. Jimin looked exhausted. Completely exhausted. As though simply remembering all of this was painful. Dear viewers, imagine receiving messages from someone who knows exactly who matters most to you. Would you ignore them or immediately become afraid? Tell us honestly in the comments and let us know where you're watching from today. Inside the room, Namjoon slowly looked toward the window. Someone had been watching. For 6 months, someone had carefully manipulated Jimin. Someone had turned his fear into a prison. And now, they were apparently close enough to know what was happening inside this hospital room. Suddenly, Jungkook spoke. What happened after that first night? Jimin looked at him. The messages kept coming. Every day. Almost. Silence. They knew things. What kind of things? They knew where you were. Everyone looked at Jungkook. They knew when you practiced. Silence. They knew when you were tired. Silence. They knew when you argued with me. Jungkook slowly frowned. How? I don't know. The answer came immediately. I don't know. Then another thought suddenly appeared in his mind. His eyes widened. No. Everyone looked at him. No. What? Taehyung asked. Jimin looked frightened again. The picture. What picture? The first picture. Silence. The first picture they ever sent me. Nobody moved. Namjoon stepped closer. What about it? Jimin looked directly at him. It wasn't taken outside. The room became still. What? It wasn't taken outside. Nobody understood. Jimin's breathing became uneven. It was inside. Silence. It was inside our practice building. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even Jungkook looked stunned. Jimin's hands started shaking again. They sent me a picture of Jungkook sitting alone in one of the rehearsal rooms. Silence. He was drinking water. Silence. He looked tired. Silence. And the picture was taken from inside the room. The atmosphere changed instantly. This was different. Very different. Because this meant something terrifying. Whoever was watching them had somehow entered places they considered safe. Jin looked disturbed. That's impossible. No one answered. Right. Still nobody answered. Because suddenly, it no longer seemed impossible. Yoongi's expression slowly changed. He looked serious. Very serious. Then he asked a question that made everyone uncomfortable. Who knew Jimin and Jungkook were arguing 6 months ago? The room became quiet. What? Taehyung asked. Answer the question. Nobody spoke. Yoongi looked at everyone. Who knew? Namjoon frowned. Not many people. Yoongi nodded. Exactly. Silence. The practice room picture means they had access. Silence. The messages mean they had information. Silence. And the arguments between Jimin and Jungkook. He looked around slowly. They weren't public. Nobody moved. Because everyone understood what he was implying. The circle of possible suspects had suddenly become much smaller. Jimin felt cold. Very cold. Then another memory returned. A forgotten detail. A voice. A sentence. A strange sentence. His eyes widened. No. He remembered. He actually remembered. Someone had spoken to him that night. Someone beside the black car. Someone who smiled. The person had said only one thing. Jimin slowly lifted his head. He looked terrified. Namjoon immediately noticed. What is it? Jimin's lips trembled. I remember. Silence. I remember what they said. Nobody moved. What did they say? Jungkook asked quietly. Jimin looked directly at him. Then he whispered the sentence that made every person inside the hospital room freeze. The stranger had smiled at him and said, You and Jungkook trust people too easily. Nobody moved. The sentence seemed to echo through the entire room. You and Jungkook trust people too easily. For several seconds, the only sound inside the hospital room was the soft beeping of the heart monitor. Jimin's face had become completely pale. Because now he could hear the voice again. Not clearly. Not enough to identify the person. But enough to remember the feeling. The person had sounded calm. Too calm. almost as if they already knew him. Almost as if they already knew Jungkook. Taehyung slowly frowned. That's it. Jimin looked at him. That's all they said. Jimin nodded weakly. Taehyung looked confused. That doesn't make any sense. Yoongi suddenly disagreed. It does. Everyone looked at him. He crossed his arms. It means something. What? Jin asked. Yoongi looked toward the floor. It means the person knows both of them. Silence. At least enough to have an opinion about them. The room became quiet again. Namjoon's expression slowly changed. Because the more they talked about it, the more uncomfortable everything became. This no longer felt like a random stalker. This sounded personal. Very personal. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Can you remember anything else? Jimin immediately tried. He closed his eyes. Dark parking lot. Black car. The stranger. The smile. The sentence. But after that, nothing. He slowly shook his head. No. Jungkook lowered his eyes. For the first time that night, he looked worried in a different way. Because now he was thinking about something else. Who could possibly know them this well? He suddenly remembered the message. Take care of Jungkook. He means everything to you. The words sounded strange. Almost intimate. Almost as though the sender had known about their relationship for a long time. He slowly looked up. Did they ever mention me again? Jimin looked surprised. What? In the messages. Silence. Did they talk about me? Jimin hesitated. Everyone noticed. Namjoon frowned. Jimin. Jimin lowered his eyes. There was another silence. Then he nodded. Yes. The room immediately became still. Taehyung looked confused. What did they say? Jimin looked uncomfortable. What did they say? Taehyung repeated. Jimin swallowed hard. He looked directly at Jungkook. Then he quietly answered. They talked about you a lot. Nobody moved. A lot, Jungkook repeated. Jimin nodded. What kind of things? Silence. Jimin. Another silence. Finally. They knew your habits. Jungkook frowned. They knew what kind of coffee you liked. Silence. They knew your sleeping schedule. Silence. They knew which songs you listened to when you couldn't sleep. Silence. They knew when you smiled even if you were upset. Nobody said anything. Because this was becoming disturbing. Very disturbing. Dear viewers, imagine discovering that a stranger somehow knows small details about someone you care about. Would you think it was coincidence, or would you immediately feel afraid? Tell us honestly in the comments and let us know where you're watching from today. Inside the room, Taehyung slowly looked at Jungkook. Then he looked at Jimin. Then back at Jungkook again. This is creepy. Nobody disagreed. Jungkook himself looked uncomfortable. Because even some of those details were things he rarely talked about. Suddenly, another thought appeared. His eyes narrowed. Wait. Everyone looked at him. Did they ever ask you for money? Jimin blinked. What? Money? No. Did they ask you to leak information? No. Did they ask you to meet them? No. Jungkook frowned even more. Then he looked directly at Jimin. So they only wanted one thing. Silence. They wanted you away from me. The sentence immediately changed the atmosphere. Because it was true. Every threat, every message, every rule, everything had one purpose. Separation. Jimin slowly nodded. Yes. Nobody spoke. Then Jin suddenly looked confused. But why? Silence. Why would someone go through all this effort just to keep two people apart? Nobody had an answer. Then, Taehyung suddenly froze. His expression changed. Very slightly. But enough for Namjoon to notice. Taehyung. No response. Taehyung. Slowly, he looked up. What? You look like you're thinking about something. Silence. No. Don't lie. Taehyung looked away. Everyone immediately noticed. Jungkook frowned. What is it? Silence. What? Still silence. Finally, Taehyung sighed. It's probably nothing. Nobody accepted that answer. What? Jungkook asked again. Taehyung rubbed his forehead. Then he slowly looked at Jimin. When did the messages start? You already asked that. No. His expression became serious. I mean the exact date. Jimin looked confused. I don't remember. Try. The room became quiet. Jimin closed his eyes. He tried to remember. Company event. Late night. Parking lot. Black car. Then, his eyes suddenly opened. Oh. Everyone looked at him. What? Namjoon asked. It was. Silence. It was the day before Jungkook's birthday. Nobody moved. Then they all looked at Taehyung. Because his expression had changed again. This time, he looked genuinely disturbed. Jungkook frowned. What? Taehyung did not answer. Taehyung. Still nothing. Why are you acting like that? For several seconds, he simply stood there. Then he slowly exhaled. Because. Silence. Someone talked to me that night. The entire room froze. What? Namjoon asked. Taehyung looked directly at him. The night before Jungkook's birthday. Silence. Someone stopped me in the parking lot. Nobody breathed. Jimin looked stunned. What? Taehyung's expression became darker. They asked me a strange question. The room remained silent. Jungkook looked directly at him. What question? Taehyung slowly turned toward him. Then, with a troubled expression, he answered. They asked me if I thought you, and Jimin would always choose each other over everyone else. Nobody spoke. The room seemed to freeze around Taehyung's words. They asked me if I thought you, and Jimin would always choose each other over everyone else. Jungkook stared at him. Jimin stared at him. Even Yoongi, who had been calm all night, slowly raised his eyes. The question itself sounded strange. Too strain. Because it was not about schedules. It was not about money. It was not about private information. It was personal. Very personal. Taehyung slowly lowered his eyes. At that time, he had thought it was simply a weird question from a stranger. Now, it felt completely different. Jin was the first to speak. Who was it? Taehyung shook his head. I don't know. What did they look like? I couldn't see properly. Why not? It was dark. Silence. They were wearing a cap. The entire room became quiet again. Jimin's face immediately changed. A cap. Taehyung looked at him. Yeah. Jimin's breathing became uneven. A black cap. Taehyung frowned. I think so. Nobody moved. Jimin looked disturbed. Because the person he saw in the parking lot had also been wearing a cap and standing beside a black car. The similarities were becoming impossible to ignore. Namjoon noticed his expression immediately. You think it was the same person? Jimin slowly nodded. I don't know. Silence. But maybe. Jungkook looked from one person to the other. Then why didn't you tell us this before? He asked Taehyung. Taehyung looked uncomfortable. Because I forgot. Silence. It happened months ago. Silence. And honestly, he looked down. I didn't think it mattered. Nobody blamed him. Because none of them could have imagined this. How could they? Who would expect a random conversation in a parking lot to become connected to 6 months of fear and threats? Then Jungkook suddenly frowned. Wait. Everyone looked at him. You said someone stopped you. Taehyung nodded. Yes. Did they know your name? Silence. Taehyung blinked. Then he froze. The room immediately became still. Because he had remembered something. Something small. Something he had completely forgotten. Oh. Nobody moved. Oh. Namjoon stepped closer. What? Taehyung looked up. His expression had changed again. They did. Nobody spoke. What? Jin asked quietly. They knew my name. The atmosphere inside the room became heavier. How? Jungkook asked. I don't know. Silence. They said. Taehyung stopped speaking. What did they say? Yoongi asked. For several seconds, he simply stood there. Then he quietly answered. They said, Taehyung, you protect Jungkook too much. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because now there was no question anymore. This person definitely knew them. Not from the internet. Not from television. Not from rumors. Personally. Because knowing names was one thing. Knowing relationships was another. But knowing personalities, that was different. Very different. Dear viewers, what would you think if a stranger somehow knew the deepest dynamics inside your closest friendships? Would you assume they were watching from afar, or would you begin suspecting someone closer? Tell us honestly in the comments and let us know where you're watching from today. Inside the room, Jungkook slowly looked down. He was thinking hard, because suddenly another memory appeared. A strange memory. A conversation. Months ago. Someone had once joked with him. Someone had once said, you and Jimin act like you'll never leave each other. At that time, he had laughed. Now, the sentence suddenly felt different. His eyes slowly widened. No. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe. But why did he suddenly remember it? Jungkook. He looked up. Namjoon was watching him. What? You look like you're thinking about something. Silence. No. You're lying. Jungkook sighed. It might be nothing. Say it. Everyone looked at him. Jungkook hesitated. Then he slowly nodded. I remembered something. Nobody interrupted. A few months ago. Silence. Someone made a strange comment. The room became still. What kind of comment? Jimin asked. Jungkook looked at him. They said I depended on you too much. Jimin blinked. What? They said people like us eventually destroy each other. Nobody moved. The sentence sounded strange. Almost threatening. Almost warning. Who said that? Taehyung asked. Silence. Jungkook frowned. He could see the memory. A hallway. A conversation. Laughter. Then that sentence. But the face felt blurry. I can't remember. What? Jin asked. I can't remember. How can you not remember? I don't know. He looked frustrated. I remember the words. Silence. I remember exactly what they said. Silence. But I can't remember their face. Nobody spoke. Because that somehow felt even worse. Then Yoongi suddenly asked a different question. When exactly did this happen? Jungkook thought carefully. Then, his expression changed. Because he remembered. His eyes widened. No way. Everyone looked at him. What? Namjoon asked. Jungkook slowly looked up. It was. Silence. It was also the day before my birthday. Nobody moved. The room became completely silent. 3 people. 3 separate encounters. One date. The day before Jungkook's birthday. Jimin received his first message. Taehyung met a stranger. Jungkook heard a strange warning. All on the same night. Nobody knew what to say. Because this was no longer coincidence. Not even close. Jimin suddenly felt cold again. Very cold. Because another memory appeared. Another detail. Another piece. The first message. The stranger. The smile. Then, something else. His breathing suddenly stopped. He remembered another sentence. A sentence he had completely forgotten. No. Everyone looked at him. Jimin. He slowly lifted his head. His face looked pale. What happened? Jungkook asked. Jimin's lips trembled. He said something else. Nobody moved. What? Namjoon asked. Hey. Jimin swallowed hard. He looked at me. Silence. And then he said. The room waited. Then, very quietly, Jimin finished the sentence. This will all begin with a birthday. Nobody moved. The sentence seemed to hang in the air. This will all begin with a birthday. Jimin's voice had become so quiet that it almost sounded like a whisper, yet everyone heard every word. Jungkook slowly frowned. Taehyung looked confused. Jin looked disturbed. Namjoon and Yoongi exchanged glances. Because the sentence felt intentional. Planned. Almost like the beginning of something. Not a random threat. Not a random encounter. A beginning. Silence filled the room again. Then Jungkook finally spoke. My birthday. Jimin looked at him. They said it would begin with my birthday. Jimin nodded. Yes. The atmosphere became heavier. Because they all knew something important. 6 months ago, around Jungkook's birthday, everything had changed. Everything. That was when Jimin became distant. That was when arguments started. That was when misunderstandings appeared. That was when they slowly began drifting apart. Jungkook slowly lowered his eyes. Then he looked up again. When exactly did you get the first message? Jimin thought carefully. It was late. Silence. Maybe around midnight. Jungkook froze. Everyone noticed. What? Namjoon asked. Jungkook looked stunned. Midnight. Silence. My birthday started at midnight. Nobody moved. The meaning slowly settled over the room. The first threat had arrived at the exact moment Jungkook's birthday began. Not before. Not after. Exactly when the date changed. That could not be coincidence. No. That was impossible. Someone had chosen that moment deliberately. Someone had planned it. Dear viewers, what would you think if every painful event in your life could be traced back to one specific date and one carefully planned beginning? Tell us honestly in the comments and let us know where you're watching from today. Inside the room, Yoongi slowly sat down. His expression looked darker now. Because the more details they remembered, the stranger everything became. He suddenly spoke. This person is patient. Everyone looked at him. What? Jin asked. They waited. Silence. They prepared. Silence. And then they started exactly when they wanted. Nobody interrupted. They didn't act randomly. Silence. They had a goal. The room became quiet again. Because nobody could disagree. This person had watched. Waited. Planned. Then acted. That was frightening. Very frightening. Taehyung looked toward the window again. Suddenly, he felt uncomfortable, almost as if someone really might be watching. He immediately looked away. Then another thought appeared. He looked at Jimin. When you received those messages. Silence. Did they ever mention birthdays again? Jimin frowned. I don't think so. Try to remember. Jimin closed his eyes. At first, nothing. Then, a memory. A message. A short message. His eyes slowly opened. Oh. Everyone looked at him. What? Jimin swallowed hard. There was one. Nobody moved. What did it say? Jungkook asked. Jimin looked at him. It came 2 months later. Silence. I had almost convinced myself everything would stop. Silence. Then they sent another message. Nobody interrupted. It said. He stopped speaking. What? Namjoon asked. It said. His voice became weaker. Birthdays change everything. People reveal who matters most to them. Nobody spoke. Because somehow, that sentence sounded personal. Again. Too personal. Almost emotional. Almost jealous. Jungkook slowly frowned. Why would someone care who mattered most to him? Why would that matter? Then another thought suddenly appeared. A memory. A very specific memory. He looked up. No way. Everyone looked at him again. What? Taehyung asked. Jungkook looked disturbed. My birthday. Silence. What about it? Jungkook looked at Jimin. 6 months ago. Silence. Something happened. Jimin blinked. What? You left my birthday party. The room became quiet. Jimin's eyes widened slightly. Because he remembered. Yes. He had left. Early. Without explanation. Everyone had thought he was angry. Jungkook himself had been upset. At the time, he could not understand why Jimin suddenly disappeared. You remember? Jungkook asked. Jimin nodded slowly. Yes. Silence. You got a message that night. Jimin froze. Because he had. Nobody knew that. Nobody. You looked at your phone. Silence. Then your expression changed. Silence. And 10 minutes later, you left. The room became completely still. Because suddenly, the beginning of everything seemed much clearer. Namjoon frowned. Wait. Everyone looked at him. That was the first time you disappeared. Jimin slowly nodded. Yes. And after that, Namjoon looked troubled. You and Jungkook started arguing more. Another nod. Taehyung slowly looked between them. Then his expression changed. Because he remembered something too. His eyes widened. No. Everyone turned toward him. What? No way. What happened? Jin asked. Taehyung looked directly at Jungkook. The birthday. Silence. After Jimin left. Silence. You spent the rest of the night looking for him. Jungkook froze. Because he remembered. He remembered everything. He remembered calling. Sending messages. Walking outside. Waiting. He remembered feeling hurt. Then, another memory appeared. His breathing suddenly stopped. Because he remembered something else. Someone had spoken to him that night. A voice. A sentence. A very strange sentence. He slowly lifted his eyes. No. Everyone looked at him. What? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook's expression had completely changed. He talked to me. Nobody moved. What? The person. Silence. The same person. Silence. He spoke to me on my birthday. The room froze. What are you talking about? Taehyung asked. Jungkook looked directly at him. I remember now. Nobody breathed. He was at the party. The entire room became silent. Because if that was true, then the person who started all of this had been standing near them from the very beginning. Nobody moved. The room became so quiet that the sound of the heart monitor suddenly seemed loud. He was at the party. Jungkook's words hung heavily in the air. Jimin stared at him. Taehyung stared at him. Everyone did. Because if that was true, then everything they believed about this situation changed again. The person had not simply been watching from afar. The person had been close. Close enough to attend a birthday party. Close enough to speak directly to Jungkook. Close enough to see everyone together. Namjoon slowly stepped forward. What do you remember? Jungkook frowned. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I remember pieces. Silence. Only pieces. The room waited. Jungkook closed his eyes. The memories were blurry. Music. Laughter. Birthday decorations. The members. Staff. Friends. People talking. Then, someone beside him. A voice. A strange voice. I remember standing near the balcony. Nobody interrupted. I had my phone. Silence. I was trying to call Jimin. Jimin looked down. Because he remembered ignoring those calls. I was upset. Silence. And someone came beside me. The room remained still. Jungkook slowly opened his eyes. I thought they were just another guest. What happened? Jin asked quietly. They asked me why I looked sad. Silence. What did you say? Namjoon asked. I said someone important had suddenly left. Nobody moved. Then Jungkook's expression changed. Because he remembered another piece. The stranger had smiled. Not kindly. Not cruelly. Just. Strangely. What happened next? Jimin asked softly. Jungkook looked directly at him. They asked me another question. Silence. What question? He swallowed hard. Then he quietly answered. If that person disappeared forever, who would you become? Nobody spoke. Because the question sounded wrong. Completely wrong. Almost like a test. Almost like curiosity. Almost like someone trying to understand something. Taehyung slowly frowned. That's creepy. Nobody disagreed. Jungkook looked troubled. Because at the time, he had simply thought the person was being strange. Nothing more. He had laughed. Actually laughed. Then he remembered. Oh. Everyone looked at him. What? I answered. Silence. What did you say? Yoongi asked. Jungkook looked down. Then he slowly smiled. A sad smile. I said he would never disappear forever. The room became quiet. Jimin's eyes slowly widened. Because he knew exactly who Jungkook had been talking about. Him. Jungkook looked up again. I remember saying it. Silence. I said people leave sometimes. Silence. I said people get hurt. Silence. But. His voice became softer. I said some people stay important no matter what happens. Nobody moved. Jimin's throat suddenly tightened. Because he knew. He knew. Even 6 months ago. Even when he left the party. Even when Jungkook was upset. He still mattered. The realization hurt. Because all this time, he thought he had ruined everything. Yet hearing this, he was no longer sure. Dear viewers, what would you feel if you discovered that someone never stopped considering you important, even after months of distance and misunderstandings? Tell us honestly in the comments and let us know where you're watching from today. Inside the room, Taehyung slowly crossed his arms. Then he frowned again. Wait. Everyone looked at him. Did the person say anything after that? Jungkook blinked. He thought carefully. At first, nothing. Then, a memory appeared. His expression changed. Yes. Nobody moved. He did. Silence. What did he say? Namjoon asked. Jungkook looked uncomfortable. He looked surprised. Silence. Then he said. Jungkook stopped speaking. What? He said. He slowly lifted his eyes. Interesting, so you're the one who needs him more. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The room suddenly became very quiet. Because that sentence sounded deeply personal. It sounded like an observation. A conclusion. As though the person had been watching. Studying. Comparing. Jimin looked completely stunned. Because suddenly, another memory appeared. A message. One of the anonymous messages. His eyes widened. No. Everyone looked at him. What? Jin asked. Jimin's breathing became uneven. I got a message. Silence. 3 days after the birthday. Nobody interrupted. It said. He stopped. What? It said. His voice became shaky. You're stronger than he is. That's why you'll survive this separation better. The room froze. Nobody spoke. Because the similarities were impossible to ignore. Interesting, so you're the one who needs him more. You're stronger than he is. The person had opinions. Strong opinions. About both of them. As though they knew exactly how they felt. As though they believed they understood their relationship better than they did themselves. Then Yoongi suddenly stood up. Everyone looked at him. His expression had changed completely. He looked serious. Very serious. What is it? Namjoon asked. Yoongi looked around the room. Then he slowly spoke. I think we're asking the wrong question. Nobody moved. What? We keep asking who this person is. Silence. But maybe that's not the first question. Nobody understood. What are you talking about? Taehyung asked. Yoongi looked directly at Jungkook. Then at Jimin. Then back at everyone. His voice became quieter. I think the first question is. Silence. Why are they so obsessed with these two? The room became completely still. Because suddenly, nobody had an answer. Not one. Then another sound interrupted the silence. Buzz. Everyone froze. Jimin's phone. Buzz. Again. Then again. 3 vibrations. Nobody moved. Nobody wanted to touch it. Finally, Jimin slowly looked down. A new message had arrived. His hands were trembling again. Jungkook noticed. Open it. No. Open it. No. Jimin. Silence. Very slowly. Jimin picked up the phone. He looked at the screen. One message. Only one. His fingers shook as he opened it. Then, his face lost all color. The phone nearly slipped from his hand. Jungkook immediately sat forward despite the pain. What happened? No response. Jimin. Still no response. What's wrong? Very slowly. Jimin lifted his head. His eyes looked completely terrified. Then he whispered something that made every person in the room freeze. They know we're trying to remember them. Silence. They said. His voice broke. Memory is dangerous. Stop asking questions before one of you remembers me completely. Backslash. Nobody moved. Memory is dangerous. Stop asking questions before one of you remembers me completely. The message seemed to drain all the warmth from the room. Jimin's hand was shaking so badly that he could barely hold the phone. Taehyung stared at him. Namjoon stared at him. Even Jungkook had forgotten his own condition for a moment. Because the message changed everything. Until now, they had been trying to remember. Now, someone was afraid of being remembered. That meant one thing. This person was real. Not random. Not distant. Not anonymous. Someone they had already met. Someone who believed that one memory could expose everything. Jungkook slowly looked at Jimin. "Show me." Jimin did not move. "Jimin." Slowly, he handed over the phone. Jungkook read the message. His expression became serious. Then he read it again. And again. Finally, he looked up. "He's scared." Everyone looked at him. "What?" Jin asked. Jungkook handed the phone to Namjoon. "This person is scared." Silence. "They're threatening us again," Taehyung said. "No." Everyone looked at him. "No." Jungkook slowly shook his head. If they were completely confident, they wouldn't send this. Silence. They would simply keep watching. Silence. But instead, he looked at the message. They're worried. Nobody spoke. Because somehow, it made sense. Why send another warning? Why interrupt them? Why react now? Because something had changed. They were getting closer. The thought sent a chill through everyone. Namjoon slowly looked at the message. Then his expression changed. He might be right. Taehyung frowned. What? This doesn't sound like confidence. Silence. It sounds nervous. Jimin blinked. Nervous. Namjoon nodded. Think about it. He looked around. This person has controlled the situation for months. Silence. They stayed hidden. Silence. They decided when to contact you. Silence. They decided when to threaten you. Silence. And now, he looked at the phone. They're suddenly reacting to our conversation. Nobody moved. Because the conclusion felt strange. The hunter was nervous. Yoongi slowly crossed his arms. Then he said something unexpected. They made a mistake. Everyone looked at him. What mistake? Jungkook asked. They're becoming emotional. Silence. They've stayed patient for 6 months. Silence. But tonight, he looked at the phone. They've messaged us constantly. Silence. They're losing control. Nobody spoke. Because it was true. One message. Then another. Then another. As soon as Jimin talked. As soon as they remembered details. As soon as they connected events. Another message appeared. Almost immediately. It felt rushed. Panicked. The room became quiet. Then, Jimin suddenly frowned. Everyone looked at him. What? Namjoon asked. Jimin looked down. No. Silence. No. What happened? Jimin slowly lifted his eyes. He said one of you. Nobody understood. What? He didn't say one of them. Silence. He said, one of you remembers me completely. The room remained quiet. Then Yoongi's expression slowly changed. Because he understood. So, Taehyung asked. Jimin's breathing became uneven. One of you means. Silence. He knows exactly who's in this room. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because he was right. The message had not asked who was there. The message had not wondered who knew. The message sounded certain. As though the sender could see everything. As though the sender knew exactly who was present. The atmosphere suddenly became suffocating. Dear viewers, what would you do if someone sent a message that made it sound like they could see exactly where you were and who was standing beside you? Would you stay calm, or would fear immediately take over? Tell us honestly in the comments and let us know where you're watching from today. Inside the room, Taehyung slowly looked toward the hospital door, then toward the window, then toward the hallway. For the first time that night, he looked genuinely unsettled. Don't tell me. Silence. Don't tell me he's actually here. Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. Then, buzz. Everyone froze. Another message. Jimin looked horrified. No. Buzz. Again. Then again. 3 new messages. Nobody moved. Very slowly, Namjoon took the phone. His expression became serious. He opened the first message. The color immediately disappeared from his face. What? Jin asked. Namjoon did not answer. He opened the second message. Then the third. His expression somehow became even worse. Namjoon. Still nothing. Namjoon. Very slowly. He lifted his eyes. What happened? Jungkook asked. For several seconds, Namjoon simply stared at everyone. Then he whispered. He sent pictures. Nobody moved. What pictures? Silence. Namjoon looked disturbed. Pictures taken tonight. The room froze. What? He swallowed hard. They're pictures of this hospital. Nobody breathed. He looked down at the phone. One is the front entrance. Silence. One is the parking lot. Silence. And he stopped speaking. Everyone stared at him. And what? Namjoon's hand tightened around the phone. Then he slowly lifted his eyes. And one. Silence. Is this floor? Nobody moved. Nobody even blinked. Because suddenly, this no longer felt like a threat. It felt immediate. Very immediate. Then Jimin noticed something. Namjoon had not shown them the pictures. He was only staring at them. Almost as if he did not want anyone else to see. Jimin's breathing became uneven. What? Silence. What is it? No response. Namjoon. Very slowly. Namjoon handed him the phone. Jimin looked at the final picture. Then, his entire body froze. Because the picture had been taken from the end of the hallway. And inside that picture, through the glass panel beside the door, their hospital room could be seen, including every person standing inside. And in the bottom corner of the image, there was a caption. Only one sentence. I told you memory is dangerous. Jimin's hand immediately went cold. He stared at the picture. Then he looked at the hospital door. Then back at the picture again. No. No. This could not be real. The photograph had clearly been taken from the end of the hallway. There was no mistake. The angle was exact. The glass panel beside the door was visible. The light from their room was visible. And they were visible. All of them. Every single person. It meant one terrifying thing. Someone had been standing outside their room. Recently. Very recently. Maybe only seconds ago. Jimin suddenly took one step backward. Then another. His breathing became uneven. No. Nobody moved. No. Jungkook looked at him. Jimin. No response. Jimin. He slowly lifted his head. His eyes looked terrified. He's here. Silence. He's actually here. The sentence made everyone's expressions change. Taehyung immediately walked toward the door. Wait. Namjoon looked at him. What are you doing? I'm checking. No. Taehyung frowned. What? I said no. He could still be outside. Exactly. Silence. And you don't know who you're looking for. The room became quiet again. Because Namjoon was right. What would they even do? Open the door. Run into the hallway. Look at strangers. They had no idea who the person was. No idea what they looked like. No idea whether they were alone. Suddenly, Jin looked pale. What if they followed us here? Nobody answered. What if they saw us arrive? Still nobody answered. What if they've been here all night? The room became silent. Because every possibility sounded terrible. Yoongi slowly looked toward the door. Then at the window. Then at everyone else. His expression remained calm. Too calm. Lock the door. Everyone looked at him. What? Taehyung asked. Lock it. Silence. Right now. Namjoon immediately understood. He walked toward the door and locked it. The sound seemed strangely loud. Click. Suddenly, the room felt smaller. Safer. Yet somehow more frightening. Because now they were all aware of something. Someone might actually be outside. Listening. Watching. Waiting. Dear viewers, imagine discovering that a person who had secretly controlled your life for months was standing somewhere nearby while you talked about them. What would you do first? Tell us honestly in the comments and let us know where you're watching from today. Inside the room, Jungkook slowly sat up straighter. He ignored the discomfort. Ignored the weakness. Ignored everything. His eyes remained fixed on the picture. Zoom in. Everyone looked at him. What? Jimin asked. The picture. Silence. Zoom in. Jimin looked confused. Why? Just do it. Slowly, he obeyed. His fingers were trembling. He enlarged the image. The hallway became clearer. The walls. The lights. The doors. Then, Jimin froze. Because something appeared in the corner. A reflection. Very small. Almost impossible to notice. Wait. Everyone looked at him. What? Taehyung asked. Wait. Jimin zoomed in further. The picture became blurry. But something was there. Someone. A reflection in the glass. Nobody moved. Namjoon stepped closer. Jin too. Then Yoongi. Even Taehyung forgot to breathe. The reflection was distorted. Unclear. But definitely human. A shoulder. Part of a face. Dark clothing. And everyone froze. Because there was something else. The person was not alone. What? Taehyung's voice sounded quiet. What is that? Jimin's breathing stopped. There were two reflections. Two. One holding the phone. And another person standing slightly behind. Nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed able to process it. Because they had all imagined one person. One stalker. One observer. But this picture suggested something completely different. Jungkook looked at the screen. Then his expression changed. No. Everyone looked at him. What? No. Silence. That's impossible. What? Namjoon asked. Jungkook slowly pointed at the second reflection. There. Nobody moved. What? The second person. Silence. I know that shape. The room became completely still. Jimin looked at him. What are you talking about? Jungkook kept staring. His eyes slowly widened. Because he recognized something. A habit. A posture. A way of standing. One shoulder slightly lower than the other. One hand inside a pocket. His breathing became uneven. No. Everyone looked frightened now. Jungkook. No response. Jungkook. He slowly lifted his eyes. His face looked pale. I've seen that before. Nobody moved. Where? Namjoon asked. Silence. Where? Jungkook looked down again. Then back at the picture. Then down again. His heart suddenly started beating faster. Because the posture felt familiar. Dangerously familiar. But why? Where? Where had he seen it? Then, a memory appeared. Not a clear memory. Only an image. Someone waiting. Someone standing silently. One hand in a pocket. One shoulder lower than the other. His breathing stopped. No way. The room froze. What? Taehyung asked. Jungkook looked directly at him. I remember. Nobody moved. I remember seeing that person. Silence. When? Jin asked. Another silence. Then, Jungkook slowly lifted his eyes. His voice came out as almost a whisper. Not 6 months ago. Nobody breathed. Then when? He looked around the room. Then at Jimin. Then back at the picture. And finally he answered. I saw that person today. Nobody moved. The room seemed to stop completely. Today. Not months ago. Today. The danger was not old. It was not distant. It was immediate. Very immediate. Taehyung slowly shook his head. No. Jungkook did not blink. Yes. That's impossible. I know. Then where? Nobody breathed. Because suddenly, that question felt more terrifying than any message. Jungkook looked directly at the hospital door. Then, very slowly, he whispered, I saw that person somewhere inside this hospital. Nobody moved. The words seemed to take all the air out of the room. I saw that person somewhere inside this hospital. Jimin's fingers immediately tightened around the phone. Taehyung stared at Jungkook. Namjoon frowned. Jin looked completely confused. Even Yoongi's expression changed. Because if Jungkook was right, then the danger was much closer than any of them had imagined. Not outside. Not somewhere in the city. Inside the hospital. The same building. Possibly on the same floor. Possibly only a few doors away. The thought alone was enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Where? Namjoon asked quietly. Jungkook looked down. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I remember seeing them. Silence. But I don't remember where. Nobody spoke. Because that somehow sounded even worse. The memory existed. It was there. But it was incomplete. Like a door that refused to open. Taehyung immediately shook his head. No. Everyone looked at him. No. What? Jin asked. This is ridiculous. Silence. We're exhausted. Silence. We're scared. Silence. And now we're starting to imagine things. Nobody answered. Because a part of everyone wanted to believe he was right. Wanted this to be imagination. Wanted this to be a misunderstanding. But then, Jimin slowly raised the phone. The photograph. The reflections. The messages. The threats. None of that felt imaginary. Namjoon looked at Jungkook again. Try. Silence. Try to remember. Jungkook closed his eyes. Hospital. Bright lights. Voices. Footsteps. Wheelchairs. Doctors. Nurses. The emergency room. The elevator. His room. Nothing. Then, something. A hallway. Someone standing near a vending machine. One hand inside a pocket. one shoulder slightly lower. His eyes suddenly opened. Oh. Everyone froze. What? Taehyung asked. I remember more. Nobody moved. Where? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook frowned. Near the elevators. Silence. When? After I woke up. The room became still. Because that had happened only a short time ago. Jungkook looked disturbed. I remember opening my eyes. Silence. I remember a nurse speaking. Silence. And I remember looking outside. Nobody interrupted. There was someone standing there. Silence. They looked toward my room. Silence. Then they walked away. Nobody breathed. You're sure? Namjoon asked. Jungkook slowly nodded. Yes. The room became cold again. Because now there was a timeline. Someone had been near his room after he woke up. Someone had later taken pictures. Someone had sent messages. Someone was still watching. Dear viewers, imagine remembering that you saw the person threatening you only hours ago without realizing who they were at the time. Would you try to find them, or would you be too afraid to leave the room? Tell us honestly in the comments and let us know where you're watching from today. Inside the hospital room, Taehyung suddenly walked toward the door again. This time, nobody stopped him immediately. His jaw had tightened. He looked angry. Really angry. Taehyung. He ignored Namjoon. Taehyung. Still no response. Finally, he turned around. I can't sit here. Silence. I can't. He looked at everyone. Someone has been terrorizing Jimin for 6 months. Silence. They've been watching us. Silence. They're apparently somewhere in this hospital. Silence. And we're doing nothing. Nobody answered. Because they understood. They were frustrated too. Helpless. Confused. Afraid. Taehyung looked directly at Jimin. I blamed you. Silence. I yelled at you. Silence. I thought you hurt Jungkook. Silence. But someone else caused all of this. His voice had become quieter. And they're right here. The room remained silent. Because suddenly, his anger had changed direction. Then Jungkook spoke. Don't go. Taehyung looked at him. Why? Because that's what this person wants. The room became quiet again. What? They keep controlling everything. Silence. They tell Jimin what to do. Silence. They send messages. Silence. They react every time we react. Silence. Jungkook looked at him carefully. If you run into the hallway now, they're controlling us again. Nobody moved. Because. That also made sense. Taehyung looked frustrated. Then slowly. He stepped away from the door. Nobody spoke. A few seconds later, Yoongi suddenly frowned. Everyone looked at him. What? Jin asked. Yoongi did not answer. Instead, he looked toward the photograph again. Then toward the door. Then toward the photograph again. Something about it bothered him. Very much. What? Still no answer. Yoongi. He slowly lifted his eyes. I think something's wrong. Nobody moved. What do you mean? Namjoon asked. Yoongi looked at the phone. The picture. Silence. What about it? He frowned. If the picture was taken from the end of the hallway. Silence. And if someone was standing there. Silence. Then, why are the reflections visible? Nobody spoke. Because they did not understand. Yoongi continued. The lights in this room are bright. Silence. The hallway is darker. Silence. The reflections shouldn't look like that. Everyone stared at him. He looked directly at the photograph. They're too clear. Nobody moved. Then his expression changed. Because suddenly, he realized something. No way. Everyone looked at him. What? Yoongi slowly took the phone. He enlarged the image. Then enlarged it again. And again. Finally, he froze. What happened? Namjoon asked. Yoongi slowly lifted his eyes. His expression had completely changed. The reflections. Silence. They're not reflections. Nobody moved. What? His voice became quieter. They're inside. The room became completely silent. Nobody even breathed. What are you talking about? Taehyung whispered. Yoongi looked directly at everyone. Then he slowly answered. The picture wasn't taken from outside our room. Silence. It was taken from inside this room. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. It was taken from inside this room. The sentence seemed impossible. Completely impossible. Jimin stared at Yoongi. Namjoon stared at him. Taehyung looked as if he had misheard. Even Jungkook had forgotten to blink. Silence filled the room. Then Jin laughed once. A short laugh. Nervous. Confused. No. Nobody looked at him. No, that's impossible. Silence. How could someone take this picture from inside the room? Still nobody answered. Because nobody had an answer. Yoongi slowly lowered the phone. I don't know. Silence. But those aren't reflections. Silence. I'm sure. The room became cold again. Jimin slowly looked around. The hospital bed. The chairs. The window. The door. The bathroom. Nothing looked different. Everything looked normal. Yet suddenly, nothing felt normal anymore. Because if Yoongi was right, someone had somehow entered this room. Or someone inside the room had taken the picture. The thought appeared in everyone's minds at the same time. And immediately, everyone became quiet. Very quiet. Because nobody wanted to say it. Nobody wanted to think it. But the possibility existed. Then Taehyung slowly spoke. No. Silence. No. He looked at Yoongi. Stop. Nobody moved. You're overthinking. Silence. There has to be another explanation. Yoongi looked at him calmly. Like what? No answer. Taehyung opened his mouth. Then closed it again. Because he could not think of one. The room became silent again. Jimin's breathing became uneven. He suddenly felt cold. Very cold. Because another thought had appeared. A horrible thought. What if? What if he had put everyone in danger by telling the truth tonight? What if the person really had entered this room? What if they were still nearby? His hands started shaking again. Jungkook immediately noticed. Jimin. No response. Look at me. No response. Jimin. Slowly, he lifted his eyes. He looked terrified. He's here. Silence. He's here. No. He is. No. He is. Jimin's voice suddenly broke. He is. Then he looked around again. Every corner. Every shadow. Every object. Nothing looked unusual. And somehow, that made everything worse. Dear viewers, what would you do if someone suggested that the person threatening you might have already been inside the room with you? Would you stay calm, or would panic immediately take over? Tell us honestly in the comments and let us know where you're watching from today. Inside the room, Namjoon slowly stood up. His expression had become serious. Very serious. We need to think. Nobody moved. We're all scared right now. Silence. And when people are scared, they make mistakes. Silence. We cannot panic. Nobody spoke. Because he was right. They needed to think. They needed facts. Facts. Not fear. Namjoon slowly looked at the photograph. Then around the room. Then back at the photograph. Suddenly, his expression changed. Wait. Everyone looked at him. What? Jin asked. Namjoon walked toward the window. Then toward the door. Then stopped. What? He frowned. Then slowly turned around. When exactly was this picture sent? Jimin blinked. What? The picture. Silence. When did it arrive? Jimin looked at the phone. His fingers trembled. Then his eyes widened. Oh. Nobody moved. What? Taehyung asked. It arrived. Silence. 3 minutes ago. The room became quiet. 3 minutes. Only 3. Namjoon slowly nodded. Good. Everyone looked confused. Good, Jin repeated. Namjoon looked directly at him. If the picture was really taken inside this room. Silence. Then it happened recently. Nobody spoke. And if it happened recently. Silence. Someone had to leave recently too. The room became still. Because that made sense. Very simple sense. If someone entered, they also had to leave. Unless. No. Nobody wanted to think about that possibility. Then Jungkook frowned. Wait. Everyone looked at him. There was someone. Silence. What? There was someone who came into this room. Nobody moved. The room seemed to stop. Namjoon's expression slowly changed. What do you mean? Jungkook looked confused. I forgot. Silence. I completely forgot. What? Taehyung asked. Jungkook frowned harder. When I first woke up. Silence. A nurse came in. Nobody moved. And she checked my condition. Silence. She asked me questions. Silence. Then she left. The room remained still. Because nothing about that sounded strange. Then, Jungkook looked up. No. Everyone looked at him. What? Not one nurse. Silence. There were 2. Nobody moved. What? There were 2 nurses. The atmosphere suddenly changed. Jungkook's breathing became uneven. The first one checked my condition. Silence. The second one came later. Silence. After everyone stepped outside for a few minutes. Nobody breathed. Namjoon's eyes slowly widened. What second nurse? I don't know. Silence. I thought she worked here. Silence. She came inside. Silence. She stood beside my bed. Silence. Then. He suddenly stopped speaking. Nobody moved. Then what? Jimin whispered. Jungkook looked pale. Very pale. Because suddenly, he remembered something. The second nurse. She had not checked anything. She had not touched any equipment. She had not looked at any monitors. Instead, she had looked around the room. Slowly. Carefully. As if she was memorizing it. His heart suddenly started beating faster. What happened? Namjoon asked. Jungkook looked directly at him. Then his voice came out almost as a whisper. She asked me if I was expecting visitors tonight. Nobody moved. Then she smiled. Silence. And said someone important was finally going to tell the truth. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Someone important was finally going to tell the truth. The sentence echoed inside the room like a warning they had somehow ignored. Jungkook's face had gone completely pale. Jimin stared at him as if he had forgotten how to blink. Taehyung looked between them, his expression filled with disbelief. Even Namjoon and Yoongi, who had stayed relatively calm throughout the night, looked shaken for the first time, because the meaning was terrifyingly clear. The second nurse had known. She had known someone would tell the truth tonight. She had known Jimin would finally speak. She had known this conversation would happen before it even began. Silence swallowed the room. Then Jin slowly took one step backward. "No," he whispered. Nobody looked at him. "No, that's impossible." Still nobody moved. How could she know that? Nobody answered because nobody had an answer. Jimin suddenly felt cold all over. He remembered the messages. He remembered the threats. He remembered the photograph. He remembered the caption. "Memory is dangerous. Stop asking questions before one of you remembers me completely." His breathing became uneven again, because now another realization appeared. The person sending the messages did not simply know things. They predicted things. They anticipated things. They somehow understood them well enough to know exactly what would happen tonight. Dear viewers, if someone predicted your actions before you even made them, would you believe it was careful observation, or would you start questioning everything you thought you knew about that person? Tell us honestly in the comments, and don't forget to tell us where you're watching from today. Inside the room, Jungkook slowly lowered his eyes. He could see the second nurse again. White uniform, mask, cap, calm eyes, gentle smile. Then suddenly another memory returned. His eyes widened. The smile. It was the smile. The same strange smile from his birthday night. The same smile from the person who asked what would happen if someone important disappeared forever. His breathing stopped. He slowly looked up. Everyone noticed his expression immediately. "Jungkook?" Namjoon asked. No response. "Jungkook?" Very slowly, Jungkook lifted his head. His face looked completely stunned. Then he whispered something that made everyone in the room freeze once again. "I remember her face." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Jungkook swallowed hard and looked directly at Jimin. Then he said, almost in disbelief, "And I think we've all met her before."